May be week 7 of the college football landscape, but it's a whole new era of the All-American show here from Studio A. Alongside, for the first time ever, my co-host Maria Trivalpiece. I'm Kyle Yeomans, welcoming you into a whole new episode. Glad you're with us. I'm just going to start calling everyone who listens to this show or watches this show my All-Americans. These are the All-Americans.
That. Okay.
That was part of it. You get the hype around the show, then you're an All-American. And now we've got an All-American co-host in Maria. Appreciate you joining us for the first time, and appreciate you keeping me on and not shifting me to the side now that Morgan Uber has moved on too.
I mean, I'm sad that Morgan Uber left. I mean, if you make me angry, though, I could push you to the
You
to
could
the
do
side.
that. Yeah, please
might
don't
be.
do that.
So don't pick against me when we have some of our picks later on in the show. That's just
Deal.
You've been warned. So
Okay.
just put it out there.
We can make it work. I like it, though. But we're so happy to have you, and this is going to be so much fun. You've already done a great job in your first week on the job, thrown kind of into the fire a little bit. You've had a lot going on in your first week, but now you get a chance to just chill out and let's talk some ball. How about that?
I'm so excited to be here, especially having the opportunity to just talk about some of these games that we watched over the weekend and see what's coming up next, and definitely thrown into the fire, but in the best way possible, and there's nowhere else I'd rather be.
Well, here we go. Let's get after it with the American Athletic Conference standings. Not much changing up at the top there, Maria, in your first week. Army, Navy, still undefeated on phenomenal runs themselves as the military academy. Then there's Tulane, a team that was, of course, picked to finish in the top 3 in the preseason poll. But then, hold on one second. Hold on. Is that the Charlotte 49ers sitting there?
That is the Charlotte 49ers. A big performance this weekend that we're definitely going to have to talk about.
I like it. North Texas on a bye week. East Carolina falling to Charlotte. And then Memphis will have a chance for their first conference win of the season as well. That whole right side of the graphic right now, that's the rebound era. That's the area of rebound possibility, trying to get their first conference win. But the Charlotte 49ers is where we'll start things off. Oh, my goodness. No quarter, question mark, again. Got it again. They will go back-to-back against ECU, and this one wasn't even close, Maria.
No, the offense for Charlotte was just so good this weekend, Kyle. I think the run game in particular just really stood out to me. Just some of those touchdowns by Cartavius Norton, and then you have Hassan Wilson as well. They just looked so fast that it wasn't even a match for ECU the way that they were running the ball.
That's the thing, is we've talked about Charlotte a couple times on this show, and I've got to give flowers where the flowers are due. That was a big-time atmosphere and a big-time performance to back it up. A lot of people around college football saw the sold-out graphics from the Charlotte 49ers, and a lot of them said, oh, that's probably because there's a good contingency of East Carolina fans going to be in attendance. That was a Charlotte 49er dominant crowd, and the team was dominant on the football field and really staked claim to their house in a perfect way. I love the commitment to the ground game. You talked about it. Morton had the early touchdown. You had Kelman, who had the chunk plays early. I liked Norton in the fact that he's 5'11", 225 pounds. He's that perfect bell cow size. They're going to hand it off to him 100 times, let him kind of wear down a defense, and then boom, you got that change of pace back in what you can bring in with Kelman, and that's where the big plays happened. It happened early and often, and they didn't do too much outside of the ground attack, and that's why they ended up with 6 touchdowns.
And I think the thing about Norton is he's just so strong, as you already touched on a little bit, that if he even gets a little bit of space, he can just push through defenders and find himself in the end zone. And you'll see it on one of these plays here. He just looked so fast. I need to get the miles per hour on one of his touchdown runs, because I watched it live and I was like, oh my goodness. But, you see the crowd right there as well. I think that's something that people don't even realize how big of a factor that is in these rivalry games. And I think that sold out crowd, they're supporting Charlotte, and the guys feed off that as well. And I think that's something that just in college athletics in general, you have a rivalry game, you need your fans to show out, and boy, did they, with a great atmosphere for an American Conference football game.
No, it felt like a legitimate rivalry all the way through, and it is a legitimate rivalry, and the fact that ECU went into Charlotte and looked completely off their own track. They had everything working for them 1 week ago, and when they took down UTSA 30-20, especially in the second half of that game, Charlotte didn't allow for that to happen because the ground game was so effective. This is a 49ers offensive line that added new pieces this offseason at left tackle, left guard, right guard. They're starting to gel. They're starting to gel a little bit, and I think this coaching staff has recognized that to the point of saying, we're going to run the ball effectively, and we're going to take it out of our quarterback's hands. I want to give credit to Purdy and what he did. Deshaun Purdy, as that redshirt freshman, as a guy that they've really relied on in spot duty without Max Brown, he came in there and was effective. That's the number one thing I want to see from Charlotte is the effectiveness on offense, and they had it in both phases.
Well, I think that they were just taking what the defense gave them as well, right? And you talk about Purdy. I want to highlight him a little bit more because I know Max Brown has been fantastic, but Purdy coming in and just having the impact that he's had, just getting wins for Charlotte, and that's what they need. They're 2-0 right now in AAC play, and I think that that's something that we need to pay a little bit more attention to just to step up in those big moments as well. And so I think that, you mentioned them starting to gel and mesh a little bit more. I think, yes, it definitely starts with that run game. If you take a look at those numbers, they were incredible. But Purdy just keeping that offense together, I think, is something that really helped the 49ers against a good ECU team.
No, you're exactly right. And I know there's a lot of conversation of when Max Brown gets back, when that he's healthy and ready to go. I still think he's the guy. I got a chance to really catch him during his time at Lincoln Christian in Oklahoma. And at the high school level, of course, he goes to Florida for a couple of seasons and then works back to Charlotte where he played well last year. I think he's still your guy. But the fact that you have a guy in Purdy that you can rely on the way that you have over these last few weeks is a huge plus for this offense as a whole. And they've utilized him to the point where they don't want to put too much on his plate. He threw 22 passes, completed 13 of them. The fact that he was efficient and threw the way that he did is all predicated off the run, the read option, the play action game, and that's where this Charlotte team is going to have some success, and they were able to do so against East Carolina.
Yeah, I think you kind of covered it all right there. They just were able to execute in those moments. And, again, 2-0 in AAC play. How do they carry this momentum forward?
Got to keep it rolling.
Yeah.
Got to keep it rolling, just like the Green Wave has been rolling as well. The Tulane Green Wave get it done, and they don't just get it done. They put up a 70, yeah, that's right, 70 burger on UAB on the road, their third straight win against Louisiana, South Florida, and now UAB. Let me read you some numbers here, Maria.
I'm ready for it. I think I probably looked at a lot of these numbers as well.
Yeah, I'm a big numbers guy from North Texas. That's all we did was numbers. 52, 41, 45, and 71. Those are the point totals that Tulane has dropped in their 4 wins so far. I thought the most impressive part of this team early in the season was their defense. I was wrong, and while their defense is still very much so a high-caliber unit, I'm super impressed with what I've seen from this offense and special teams unit. As you see, Pleasant take this all the way to the house. I think this team is the real deal because they play complementary football.
Well, and I think the other cool thing is, too, in a game like they played this past weekend, they're able to get a lot of those younger guys in as well. So they're starting to rotate in, have more depth, and I think that's going to be something that's going to help them down the road because multiple guys are getting opportunities to get game reps, and there's just such a big difference as opposed to practice reps and game reps, and so they're already putting up big numbers offensively. You mentioned how good their defense has been, and that defense that you kind of were looking forward to seeing play out this season. Now you have good offense, good defense, and good depth, which I think becomes huge, especially as we get into the later weeks of AAC play.
And we've talked on this show plenty of times about the effectiveness of running the ball well. I'm going to make a bold statement here. Bold statement right off the jump. Mekhi Hughes is the best pure running back in the conference. And I know there's a couple guys that should be in that conversation as well. A couple of them are in the backfield at Army, and Noah Short and Kanye Udo, who we'll talk about in a moment. But Mario Anderson from Memphis, I don't think any of them can do what Mekhi Hughes has done so far. According to Pro Football Focus, who does a great job of grading these collegiate athletes, out of 386 running backs in the country, Maria, Hughes is ranked number 26. He 15 carries for 119 yards, almost 8 yards per carry. UAB had no answer, and they knew going into the game that it was going to be Hughes a lot of the time.
Well, that's the thing that just stands out so much to me is the fact that when you know he's the guy, right? You know he's getting the football, and you still can't stop him. I think that just says so much about the caliber of him as a player. And I'll ask you, as somebody who watches a lot of football, like what is it about him, in your opinion, that just makes him so good?
Couple of things. The number one is the fact that he waits for blocks to develop, and there's another guy later on that I'm going to talk about this as well. They call it slow to go. They want want you to be slow to the line of scrimmage. A lot of guys want to just hit the hole as quickly as they can and get going. But if you miss a cut from your offensive line, whatever your blocking scheme is up front, you miss that cut because you're not watching. You don't have the vision. Mekhi Hughes has fantastic vision. I'm talking NFL-level vision. When he's able to do that, he has lateral ability as well. His vision and lateral ability allow him to shift his focus from one hole to the next, from one cut to the backside cut, and because of that, he breaks open these big plays. The blocking up front has done a phenomenal job for him to allow him these numbers early on, allow him to hit 120 yards pretty regularly in terms of running the football. I think for Mekhi Hughes, it's always about the vision, and it's that lateral ability that allows the blocks to develop in front of him, and then he hits the hole with the athleticism. So 3 things, I guess, total, but it really starts with those first 2 up front. And if he's able to continue doing that, we're going to be watching him on Sundays, and just like you're watching Tajay Spears, former Tulane Green Wave great, on Sundays with the Tennessee Titans. You're going to see a guy like Mekhi Hughes in that same situation very, very soon.
And which team do you want to see him on Sundays?
There's a team in North Texas that I think could really love.
Okay.
I'd love to see him on.
Okay, I have to rack my brain to try to think about who
team.
that would be. Yeah,
I just need anybody in that team to run the football well. I want to talk about the defense though before we move on, because this defense, I mentioned it. They've taken a back seat because of the high scoring, because of the ability on offense to put up video game numbers, but there's no way you put up 71 points in a football game if your defense isn't firing on all cylinders. And I mentioned that UAB had no answer for Hughes. They had no answer on offense either. They had a couple big plays that resulted in field goals, the 6 points through the first 3 quarters, and that was it for the Blazers. This defense flies to the football. They're smart. They track everything, misdirections, trick plays, play design set up early in the game that's supposed to work later. They see it coming before it even happens, and that's a sign of really good coaching. John Summerall over the top of it all, but I want to give credit to Greg Gasparato. I hope I'm saying that name right, in his first season as defensive coordinator, and Tyler Polk, the co-defensive coordinator as well. Both of those guys in that 4-2-5 nickel, which is a hard defense to teach at the collegiate level because you're taking away a linebacker and you're adding another defensive back. They do it so effectively and so fast. It is fun to watch.
And, you talk about video game numbers, right, on the offensive end, but when you look at that game from this past weekend, going into the fourth quarter, that defense only allowed 6 points.
Yep.
That 71-20 final score, those were just a couple more.
Couple touchdowns late.
Just a little bit, get some other guys in there, that sort of thing. And so I think that, we are going to talk a lot about the offense, especially with the way that they can put up 71 in a game and all those other numbers that you listed, because you are a numbers guy. But speaking of that, take a look at the dominant defense as well. Just the way that they've been able to contain teams. Man, I don't see a lot of teams being able to score against the Green Wave.
No, that's a good point. You go up against a bye week this week, and then it's Rice, North Texas, which is probably the best offense they'll face in the first 10 weeks of the season. That's not a top 15 ranked team in the country. Navy in week 12, and then they get Memphis after another bye week. So they get 2 weeks to prepare for Memphis. So tough tests on the horizon for this defense, but so far so good. They've passed every single test. Last week, 45-10 against South Florida. This week, 71-20 against UAB. And if you're UAB, you're kind of reeling right now. You haven't been winning games. You haven't been playing well. They've got to find a way to get back on track, too, and they don't have a ton of time to turn around, well, because they're going up against the Army Black Knights this week.
And, based on some of the things that we've been saying, Army's pretty good at football this year.
Oh, yeah.
From what I've said, they're the only team in the country to score on the first drive of every game this season.
Nice.
How about that?
That's how you end up winning 9 straight games in the longest active streak in college football right now. That's how you do it. You start fast and you finish strong. That's what Army's all about. And here's the thing about Army. I've always talked about the physicality of their rushing attack and their discipline on defense. I want to talk about how they have some finesse too, Maria.
Who's finessing?
They have the passing game to a finesse. You talk about those drives. 5 straight games where they've scored on their opening drive. 3 of their opening touchdowns have been in the air. A team that runs the football more than anyone, more effectively than anyone. They scored against FAU, Rice, and Tulsa on their opening drive from a passing attack. There's one of them there against Tulsa. They know how to throw the football because 5 touchdowns on 380 yards passing in just 17 completions, Maria. That you take that stat line, you place it in one game, and pretend like that's a single game stat line. You're really impressed by a passing attack that is that efficient, and that just shows that they trust in what Bryson Daly is doing, not only as a rusher and a ball carrier, but as a passer as well.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about this Army offense and break it down a little bit more, but I want to get your thoughts on this. We've talked about Horvath for Heisman. What are your thoughts on Bryson Daly? Because I feel like we're going to talk about Navy. We got to talk about Army in that same sentence as well.
And he's up there. I think if you had a Heisman vote, you utilize it on guys that show character, tenacity, leadership, and versatility, especially in the modern era of the college football landscape. Both Blake Horvath for Navy and Bryson Daly for Army do both of those things. These teams aren't 5-0 because they're just rolling over people. Well, they are, but they're just rolling
that too,
over.
That helps.
Yeah, that helps a lot too. It's not just because they're executing. It's because they're good. It's because these are good football teams, and they'll be tested more and more as the year goes on. But I really like the makeup of this Army team. They have a dominant defense, just like the Tulane one we talked about earlier. This is an Army ball club that is the real deal. And if you're a Heisman voter, I think as every week goes by and the consistency remains for a guy like Bryson Daly, I think it starts funneling in further and further and further.
You know, you said you're a numbers guy as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about the defense, but that Army defense allowing just 7 points against Tulsa, 7 in game 1, 7 in game 2. They allowed 14 points in games 2 and 3. And then again, as I said, 7 against Tulsa. So, you know, talked about Bryson Daly and some of those offensive weapons that Army has, but that defense, they're looking pretty good as well.
Oh my gosh, they're so clean when it comes to their angles and their physicality. We've seen we had a top play a couple weeks ago where there was a hit that popped the ball up in the air and ended up in an interception. I mean, they do everything well. They take the football away. They stuff the run. They're physical at the line of scrimmage. Their safeties are very, very disciplined, and they know what's going on. You don't just give up a total of 7 touchdowns in 5 games to opposing teams that are also trying to win the game without being a very, very, very good defense. But that's what they've done to this point in the year.
And I think that's something as somebody who's, you know, covered both Army and Navy a lot, not necessarily for football, but for other sports. That's one thing that you just notice is so different about their athletes is the discipline. And when you can get a coach to bring that discipline out of them on their sports side, you know, it's one thing. They have it in their daily life. Those schedules are so crazy, and the way that they perform their military duties, if you can bring that out on the sports side, you get how Army and Navy are playing in the way that they are. That's exactly where that's coming from.
Well, and I know the lower third right now is also saying that Udo and Daly fuel the Army offense.
We didn't even get to that part yet.
Yeah, that offense is also incredible too. And I think whenever it comes to Kanye Udo, he's kind of the second back because they've had a guy like Noah Short up front. But the way that he played in – 23 yards per carry, guys. 2 touchdowns. He broke 2 big plays, and it was relatively easy. I think a lot of that relies on his athleticism and his vision. I talked about Mekhi Hughes. He's the other guy. Udo is up there in terms of top running backs in the conference because he has great vision and a fantastic offensive line. I cannot emphasize how good this Army offensive line has been this year, and they continue to play strong football. Look at this. Look at the hole that was opened up, and then he just turns on the Jets. He says, "Thank you very much. I'm taking it all the way to the house in Tulsa, and you have nothing you can do to stop me."
Yeah, I think that one was 61 yards, if I'm not mistaken. And when there's holes open like that, you can just turn those Jets on a little bit and, you know, use some of that military training there as well.
Oh, yeah.
I think you've set yourself up for a good spot.
I like it. Now, turning the attention to the team that they defeated in UAB, I feel for them. I feel for the Blazers, and I use them as a transition in this last segment because we were talking about what Tulane did in terms of running the football and what Army does consistently about running the football. They've had the rushing attack gauntlet over their last 3 games. Navy, Tulane, Army. Bang, bang, bang. I don't know if you're going to face 3 straight teams that can run the football and have an agenda to run the football as effectively as those 3 teams do and do it in back-to-back-to-back weeks.
And I think you have to think about that when you are heading into your next week of games, right? It's having that perspective of, okay, this hurt. Definitely does not feel good when teams run the ball against you like that. Yep. But thinking about, we're not probably going to see attacks like that as we continue the rest of our slate. So if you can keep that morale up to at least a decent level, you still give yourself a chance to win football games. And so I think that UAB, if they can just switch that perspective a little bit, and then it comes down to too, just day by day in those small wins, right? So how can you figure out maybe you don't give up quite as many rushing yards the next time you play? And it's just taking those small steps to eventually winning football games. But, just looking back at those last 3 games you played and say, all right, look, that's a little skewed. Those teams are very, very good. They're some of the best teams in the conference. I would say here early on, right, that we would think at least 1, maybe 2 of those teams will be playing for a conference championship game.
How wild would that be? I love talking about it every week because I think it'd be so cool to have Army and Navy playing back-to-back weeks, one of which for a conference championship.
I've been tweeting that out. I mean,
so
I
cool.
love drama. You know what I mean? That's why I decided to work in television.
It's chaos.
I love the drama.
It's absolute chaos.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
And both of those schools are already going to be at each other's throats. The fan bases. Think about, I love petty social media tweets.
Yeah.
Think about the pettiness. Oh my gosh,
all
all the
sorts of
possibilities for pettiness.
Oh yeah, all sorts of pettiness.
Yeah.
I could tell you were petty in that regard. All right, let's move on to the other side of that rivalry. The Navy midshipmen, another W in the sky as they use the Blue Angels in order to do so. I love this graphic. I think you talk about pettiness. You talk about a little bit. They played Air Force. So they said, guess what? We've got the Blue Angels, which are cool. And we beat Air Force in Colorado Springs, which, by the way, I know we were just talking about Army-Navy, one of the coolest games in all of sports, not even just college football. I loved the atmosphere of when military academies play each other on campus like they did at Air Force. It was very cool seeing Colorado Springs, 2 very prideful institutions playing each other like that, but Navy was dominant. I mean, the defense had the 1 miscue on the long touchdown early, and they did not allow an inch after that. I mean, fewest points ever allowed against Air Force in this rivalry, and it shows just how good Navy is on both sides of their football as well.
I know you talk about the atmosphere of that game as well. That's the first time that Navy has beaten Air Force since 2019. So Air Force has been dominating that rivalry for a little bit. So I think Navy was looking for something to prove. And you talk about the way that they didn't allow an inch, especially on the defensive end. And that was just showing up there in Colorado Springs. Talk about atmosphere and, again, a little bit of pettiness with that graphic as well.
Pettiness is certainly there. Now, the defense was dominant. Justin Reed had 2 sacks. He continues his great start to the season. Deshaun Peel in the secondary had the interception. Both things really worked well for Navy. The ground attack, but also the way that they're able to throw the football too, because Blake Horvath for Heisman needs to continue picking up that steam here. I mean, we're talking about strapping jet engines to it. If we're talking Air Force, we're talking Blue Angels. Blake Horvath has every single opportunity to still win the Heisman because of what he's doing. Did you know, Maria?
Did I know?
Out of all of the country, the entire landscape of college football, Cam Ward from Miami, Jackson Dart from Ole Miss, Shadur Sanders from Colorado, Arch Manning from Texas, all of these big names that have been talked about all year long, there is only one man that stands as number 1 as the highest graded quarterback according to Pro Football Focus.
Can I guess who that is?
Take one guess.
Is it Blake Horvath?
It is Mr. Blake Horvath. Horvath for Heisman. By the way, Bryson Daly is number 3 in that regard, so he's not far off. The only one splitting them is Cam Ward, who is, guess what, in the Heisman conversation. Please start taking some notice, nation, of what Horvath is doing and the consistency in which he is doing so. They are legit. This offense is incredible, and Horvath is a top-notch person, leader, and talent on the football field.
Yeah, I think that's something that's so cool when you have somebody from the Naval Academy just leading in all of those categories. You talked about his performance over the weekend, 9 of 15 for 134 yards. But how about some of the targets that he's been able to throw to? I mean, we talked about Eli Heidenreich, one of those catches where his feet just stay completely in bounds. I'm sure we're going to talk about that later on as well. But look at those numbers from Heidenreich as well. 100 rushing yards, 16.7 yards per rush, 5 receptions. Man, he was just on fire the other day.
Yeah, he's listed as a slot back, and he made one of the best grabs of the year. You may even see it later in the show as we get to top plays. I have a feeling it's going to pop up there. But the way that Eli, I like electric Eli too.
I
We
like
have
that.
Horvath for Heisman. You got electric Eli.
I love alliteration
I'm
too.
all
Yes,
for the
yes,
alliterations.
yes.
But it's that combination of what he can do, what Horvath has done, and really the play calling in the sling tee as a whole. Everybody that's watched this show before has heard me rave about the sling tee.
Your favorite.
It's so fun. It's so fun to watch, and especially when it's executed the way that Navy has been doing it, and it's not by accident. This is a team that works very, very hard, that takes pride in their craft, and they do so while also being in the service academy and a student athlete. Very cool. Last time that Army and Navy, of course, were undefeated this deep into the season. It's a stat that's flown around quite a bit. 1945. What person won the Heisman Trophy in 1945?
It was an Army.
You're darn right.
It was an Army student athlete, and I did the research on this last week, and now I forget.
Doc Blanchard.
Yes.
Doc Blanchard was the one that did it. So if you're telling me that a service academy member can't win the Heisman, then no, I disagree. And I think it should win the Heisman if it continues like this. Because the last time these two teams, 1945, were undefeated, there was a Heisman winner out of one of the two service academies. I think it could happen again, and I think it will happen again as this year goes on. It'll be fun.
They're 1 and 3 right now in those rankings, and also as we mentioned last week, the chainsaw was not yet invented in 1945.
Yeah, you're right.
And Bryson Daly he was a little upset about it, but maybe he can bring some more things back.
Did we send him a gift bag and a basket with a chainsaw
as Morgan
in it?
said last week, we got to talk to compliance about that. I don't think a chainsaw going to a student athlete is something that,
especially in a service academy.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to promote that here at the American.
Let's take a look at the Navy upcoming schedule, though, because Navy's upcoming schedule is not one of ease, but is one that you have to keep an eye on, and it starts with Charlotte, or a bye week and then Charlotte. So you got the bye week this week. You go up against Charlotte, then there's Notre Dame in a fun matchup that they play at Yankee Stadium. So it's an interesting thing to talk about moving forward there.
Yeah, I think even with Charlotte, too, they're both going to be coming off byes. And Charlotte, as we talked about a little bit, pretty hot after last week's game against ECU. So that's one that you don't want to look past if you're Navy, right? You got to still take Charlotte very seriously. They are 2-0 in AAC play. That Notre Dame game, I think, is going to be a good test. And then you got Tulane there on November 16th. Again, that's a matchup I think everybody in the American's going to want to watch.
By the way, they moved that game to MetLife Stadium because they anticipate the Yankees to be playing deep into October. So that game's going to be played in East Rutherford, New Jersey, instead of the Bronx, which is a little unfortunate. I kind of was looking forward to having it at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, I went to school in the Bronx.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
I missed that place.
Why not?
I worked at Yankee Stadium.
Army Notre Dame is the one that's going to be at Yankee Stadium, and that's a little bit later in the season. So there's a couple different things to look at moving forward, but you cannot be tripped up by that Charlotte game.
No, that's the one that I'm going to have my eyes on, especially in Week 8, because I think that Charlotte's playing really well right now. I mean, I think obviously we can't talk enough about the way that Navy is playing football, both offensively and defensively, but Charlotte's got a little momentum. They're both coming off byes, and I'm always interested to see how teams approach those byes and how they come off the bye week, because it could either be a good thing or a bad thing depending on the way that you prepare your team and where your headspace is at.
I think Navy, at least in my opinion, they've looked really good coming off of a bye. They did so coming off of that Week 3 off. Went into Memphis, won that game 56-44 in what was probably the best game of the year in the American to this point. So I'm excited to see what they can continue doing, and it's been a fun thing to watch right now. All right, moving on. We've got the Temple Owls, Maria. This one hurt. This one hurt a little bit for not only the American, but for myself. I thought Temple had a shot in this game, and they played well enough to win it.
They did. You see the blocked punt right there. They took the lead after that. There's like 10:32 left in the second quarter, so just a lot of energy. There were some other highlights. Another 60-yard field goal.
Yeah.
So I just think that there were so many good things. And they were not picked to win this game, so I think the fact that they were so close to coming away with the victory is great. It's just not finishing it at the end. It was heartbreaker.
Yeah, and I think the defense, of course, with the turnovers, special teams with the block punt and the field goals, like you said, how big of another hit was it from 60 yards out? Trujillo is a dude. He hit it from 60 yards. He hit it from 42. But the one thing about the dude Trujillo as he missed it from short distance.
Yep.
And at the end of the game, how much could they have used that extra 3 points
Right.
in what should have been an automatic play? Now, it's not all on him. No doubt. He's done plenty for this Temple ball club and program to say, hey, he deserves a pass on one specific miss. But if this offense finds the end zone before the fourth quarter and can hold on to the ball at the goal line and an opportunity to win the game late, Temple wins this game by maybe one score or two. I think it's a completely different ball game if the offense is even half competitive in this game. And it was disappointing to see the offense struggle the way that they did, especially when the rest of the team around them was playing very good against a very good UConn team, a team that has only lost to two teams, Duke and Maryland, and that Duke game was very, very close.
No, I know it's a year for UConn too, where they're playing really well. So I think the fact that Temple comes into this game and they show up and they compete and they have those moments of really good football, right? Especially on the defensive end. It's one of those things that you're just hoping, how can you figure out how to finish those games? And I think that you touched on it a little bit already. But so I think if you're the Owls, you're just going back to the drawing board. All right, what did we do well? What can we do better? How can we come out victorious on the other end of it? Because that would have been a really big win for Temple.
Yeah, it would have put them in a whole new mindset. 1-5 is tough to come back from. But don't hang your head if you're the Temple Owls, because you have some winnable games coming up after the bye week. Tulsa, winnable. ECU, right now, they look like a winnable ball game. If you played as well as you did defensively and on special teams against UConn, I think you can beat ECU, even against that offense. But you need your defense to step up in that game. And then there's other chances. Some of these top teams are going to fluctuate. It's going to go back and forth. And I think there's going to be a time throughout this season where the bottom half of the league is going to have some shots at the top half of the league. So this is Temple's reset moment. Is okay, we almost had UConn, had a win a couple weeks ago against Utah State. I like what I've seen on occasion. You just cannot get caught up in the fact of saying, okay, we're 1-5, season's over.
Right. I think that that's something that any team is going to struggle with, right? When you see that record, it's like, oh, man, we come really close and then we lose, right? But I think the best teams turn it around. You know, you've seen some other teams in our conference start out with losing records and now they're performing really well. And so I think that, you know, Temple still has a shot to win some games, especially in the AAC. And I think that if they can build off the good moments, they give themselves a chance to at least be somewhat competitive. Man,
this is such a tough way to lose a game. You have the goal line, 4th and goal, everything's on the line. 3 seconds left. It's the last play of the game, and then yes, you're trying to fight. You're trying to push the pile. And who knows, if the ball's not knocked out at that very moment, maybe Temple wins the game.
I know. I was watching that. I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, they're going to, like, I had so much confidence. I was like, they're going to do it. This is going to be awesome. I was thinking about our petty tweet, you know, from the American Conference social media pages. Not that we put out petty tweets, but I was excited about it, and then it's a gut punch.
Yeah, it's a gut punch that they're going to have to rebound from, get better at, and learn from in the future. So lots of things to talk about with Temple moving forward. Now, we were just talking about a rebound, and this rebound is twofold. Now, we've got one team that lost going into a bye week and then was able to rebound against Middle Tennessee. And we've got another one in South Florida that hasn't had that chance to rebound just yet. Memphis at South Florida. First off, before we even get into this, I want to, by all means, say, if you're in the Florida area, stay safe, because, of course, that hurricane is no joke. It looks serious as it continues to travel in that direction. So we hope everybody that is in South Florida, in Florida in general, stays safe in these very, very crucial moments. Now, with all of that being said, there's also a lot of up in the air for this game specifically. They're already moving times. They may move the game entirely. We'll see what ends up happening down the line. A lot of that is yet to be decided, and it's going to determine on the weather. But in football X's and O's standpoint, let's talk about what this game means for both of these teams, because both of them really need a win.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Memphis loses to Navy, right? And they had some really big wins early. So you're thinking, oh, they're going to be at the top of the conference, and they still are. They're in my top half right now. But I think just figuring out how to correct some of the mistakes that they made against the midshipmen and then bring that to that South Florida game is something that's going to be crucial. Now, they looked really good offensively with Seth Hennigan. He is another dude, as you would call it.
He's
Is
a
that
dude.
He's a dude? He's a dude. All right. I don't know.
KY's dudes.
I don't know if I sound as cool saying it as you do, but I think I'll work on it. It's only
Either that or how lame I say it.
Oh, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. We'll have
Dudes.
that'll be up for debate. We'll put that.
Oh
we'll put
man!
that
If
out
we
to-
put that up for the debate, the YouTube comments are gonna have a field day.
Oh
with
my
it.
goodness! You
Field
never look.
day.
You
I'm
can't
gonna be like,
look
never
at the
talk
comments.
again, Kyle.
You can't look at the
Yeah,
comments.
that's
Yeah,
fair.
no.
I look at them. That's fine.
You do? Okay. But
Leave me a comment.
so anyway, Seth Hennigan equals dude in whatever way
Yep.
that we're going to say it. And so
I agree.
I think that that's something that's really going to help Memphis. And then on the South Florida side, they need a win, right? They've
Yep.
had some tough losses, especially against Tulane. They need to try to figure out how to get back to playing the offensive style that they like to play, but they've had some injuries, and that's really what's been hurting them right now.
No, they're banged up. They're banged up all over the offensive line. Of course, their quarterback position, the status of Byron Brown still remains unknown going into the later parts of the week. I mean, if you even look at the numbers, USF has every opportunity in this to be in the ball game from a numbers standpoint. They've played better competition. They've had great success up until the fourth quarter against teams like Miami and Alabama. But the way that you lost against Tulane is going to be in the back of the head of South Florida. And I think that is a hindrance. You got to get rid of that game, throw it out. And you need some people to step up. You need some of those guys, the reserves, the guys who are filling in for some of these injured starters. You got to have somebody step up if you're Alex Golish. And I believe in that staff to get those guys ready to rock.
And I think for South Florida, a bye week couldn't have come at a better time,
Awesome
right?
time.
I think that's
Yeah.
one thing that we can't really know what the impact is going to have on this Memphis-South Florida game because we don't know even how many guys were actually banged
Yeah.
up, especially when you play teams like Alabama and Miami. You know those are going to be physical battles, especially with the way that South Florida plays offense as well. And so I just think that coming in to this Memphis game off of a bye is going to be incredibly beneficial for them.
Yeah.
We talked about teams previously. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? For South Florida, man, I'm excited to see them show up in this game. But again, a lot of things have to click right, and we got to see who's going to be healthy.
Here's the thing about Memphis, too, is the fact that we're having all the fun up at the top of the conference with Army and Navy and Tulane and how well those football teams are playing right now. Memphis is just lurking. They're just there. They're still very talented. They still have Seth Hennigan. They still have Mario Anderson. Don't forget about the Memphis Tigers, everybody, because they're lurking in the weeds just like a tiger stalks its prey. Pun certainly intention, because you're the preseason favorite for a reason. One. Two, you lost to a very good Navy team who I've already talked about.
Yep.
I think this is a Memphis team, and I've said it already, that has every opportunity to run the table in the American and be in that championship game at the end of the year. Will it be easy? Absolutely not. Will they need some things to go their way? Absolutely. But from a talent and a coaching standpoint, they have all of it. So just imagine that blue-striped tiger just prowling, just ready to row and then
Lurking.
pounce over the top of a bull.
Can you redemonstrate that pounce?
I already
one
did
more
it like
time?
3 times, but yeah, sure.
No,
I
you need the
will pounce.
final pounce. I
The
think
final
that was
pounce
okay.
over the top.
And tigers pounce on bull. How
I
does
mean,
that work?
It's
What
stalking
animal?
its prey.
Yeah.
It's
okay.
stalking the prey is ultimately what it is.
But-
it's a tiger ready to attack.
Okay, a tiger
that's
ready
what
to
they
account.
are.
All right, I get it. But I feel to your point, I see where we kind of not forget, but again, the lurking analogy I really like because Memphis is 4-1 and their only loss is to that Navy
And people
team.
have written them off.
Yes, exactly. And they had a bye week too, so I think that it kind of fades into the background because you see Navy, beating Air Force, you see Army winning big, and we're talking about all these teams. We see Tulane scoring 71 points, and you're like, oh, we forgot about the preseason favorite, who's also very good, and they're lurking. They're literally lurking,
Here they
as
are.
Kyle has told us and demonstrated for us, which
I
we
like it.
really appreciate. For all the
you.
people watching, the visual was fantastic.
That needs in the cut that Zach's going to put and clip in terms of the thumbnail. It's just going to be me pouncing.
Yes,
That's
yes.
what it's going to be. All right. Keys to winning the game: South Florida, Memphis. Start with South Florida.
South Florida, they got to slow down Hennigan. That's my biggest key
Good one.
for them.
Yeah.
I just think that he's a dude. I keep using it now. I'm gonna keep calling him a dude.
Yes.
You have transformed the way that I utilize the
show.
words "do" in one show, and I also for South Florida, I want them to find their rhythm. I don't know who's going to be a quarterback.
Yeah.
We don't know who's going to be in that spot. I just hope that whoever it is for the Bulls, they get back to running that tempo offense that they run so well and just find the rhythm that they need.
I like it. I'm going to go keep Memphis one-dimensional if you're South Florida. You got to eliminate the ground game. Mario Anderson, nothing. Seth Hennigan, nothing. One or the other. You cannot allow them to have both because that's when the play action set up. That's when their read option works perfectly, and that's when they are able to settle in from an offense and they put up 50-plus points. If they are able and allowed to establish the run or get any sort of rhythm going in terms of the passing attack, that's when it gets dangerous. And then for Memphis on the other side, Maria, dominate the line of scrimmage. They have the size. They have the athleticism. They have the guys to get up there and to have some success. If you can establish the run, like I just said, if you can protect for Seth Hennigan, it's the flip-flop of what I just said. That's how you put up 50-plus points if you're Memphis, and they've got a chance to do so. It's going to be a long day for the Bulls if they can dominate the line of scrimmage, which I believe they can do.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. I think that's going to be a key for them, but I also think they're going to be able to do it, especially with the way that they've been lurking. You know, they lose one game, and we forget that they're a very good football team.
So from one 4-1 team to another, both teams coming off of a bye. We just finished up talking about Memphis. We've got a chance to talk a little North Texas Mean Green, Maria. Of course, this is close and near and dear to my heart as a grad of North Texas. But I want to welcome in one of my favorites in the industry, Hank Dickinson from the University of North Texas and the Mean Green color analyst on the Mean Green Radio Network. Hank, thanks for taking some time. I know it's been a fun start to the season at 4-1. Kind of take us through the expectation and what the reality has kind of been for this team through the first 5 games.
Well, Kyle, you know it because you've helped out a little bit already this year on our radio broadcast. The offense is what everyone wants to talk about. And certainly with Eric Morris, that's his calling card. And the offense is very good. You know, you can compare North Texas statistically at the top of the list in terms of scoring offense, passing offense, total offense. But the real story to me has been the improvement of the defense because last year, statistically, the worst in the nation, nowhere to go but up. And they have, I think, shown week-to-week improvement with one exception, and that was at Texas Tech. But you look at the loss to the Red Raiders, and you see them sitting atop the Big 12, probably not a loss that hurts you that much down the stretch after all.
No, it definitely doesn't. And I think right now, if North Texas had another shot at Texas Tech, it would be a different mentality. They may not win the game. They may not challenge the Red Raiders. They were just such a wild matchup for North Texas that week that I think it would be still a conversation, but it would not be 66-20 and a 50-plus point lead at halftime. Now, you mentioned year number 2 under Eric Morris. He is an offensive guru. They're starting to figure things out on the defensive side of things as well. What's been the biggest difference from year 1 to year 2 under Morris and how he's kind of taken charge and started to build a winning culture in Denton?
Yeah, I think it's really year number 1, part 2. When you have 77 newcomers and you're trying to set that locker room and get the kind of feel that you want, culture, you know, that we always talk about. Culture is a very real thing. You either have it or you don't. And I think the difference is this team's way ahead of last year's team at this juncture in the season in terms of just that mesh point that you want. They're on the same page, and all 3 phases are playing well. There's room for continued improvement on defense, but special teams have been very, very good, and the offense under Chandler Morris has really sparkled, especially in the last 2 weeks where he has limited any kind of turnovers in the passing game, which will be a concern this week against FAU because they're pretty good at making the opponent turn the ball over.
You know, you mentioned Chandler Morris. What do you think it has been about him that's been able for him to, you know, help that offense just mesh a little bit better?
Well, that guy right there is a bit of it. DT Sheffield is coming alive. I think the fact that he has mixed it up to nearly 20 different receivers speaks to the fact that he's going to get guys involved. That keeps those receivers always alert, always waiting for their chance. And he's got leadership skills. I mean, frankly, he's an example of the transfer portal working, you know, in reverse mode. In other words, we know and he knows he's a Power 4 player. He barring injury would still probably be there, but now he comes down and he's just jumped into this league in a really confident way. And barring injury, which has only been, you know, his only real nemesis, he's poised to have a wonderful year.
And he's always been talented. I got a chance to cover him at Highland Park, winning a state championship in Dallas, and then you had a chance to go to Oklahoma, then to TCU. You see that all the time with the transfer portal. Now, in North Texas, you've mentioned those newcomers. You mentioned the way that they've been active in the transfer portal. They also have been active in terms of rotating their tailbacks, their running backs, and it hasn't been by choice. You lose a Kika Ragsdale early in the season, and you have to have a number of guys step up. What does that say about this offensive staff? I know running back coach Patrick Cobbs really well. He's been a phenomenal add to that coaching staff these last couple of seasons, but how much does that play a factor in how explosive this offense can be and how flexible it is even with some of those injuries?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Patrick Cobbs because I don't think in any way, shape, or form you can discount the impact he's had. He's just suited for coaching young kids and especially running backs. He's one of the best ever at North Texas, and he gets a lot out of kids in terms of getting them ready even when they may not be getting playing time. And you look at what's going on right now, you're really playing with the three deep of what this running back room was going to look like at the beginning of the year. So credit to Cobbs for getting these guys continually ready. But also, an offensive line that's gone through a lot of machinations finally has kind of settled down. I would say the guy along that offensive line that has helped those running backs out the most is Jet Duncan at center. And he's versatile enough to play anywhere and has, but he's settled in. And I just think he's an all-conference leader up front and a guy that's really helped that running back room be able to just go through a lot of change, at the midway point of the season.
You mentioned that midway point of the season coming off a bye. How do you think this helps North Texas, or do you think it's something maybe that creates a little bit of a lull?
Well, I think anytime you've got injuries, and almost everybody does this time of year, you're looking to get guys back. I stopped by the training room this morning for that purpose, and I think some guys are healthier and ready to go. I also think there's a lot of excitement. North Texas, even the really good years of the mid 2000s never got off to these kind of starts. Some of that was scheduling, but this is a really critical start to hold on to for the fan base. You got some huge games coming up. You got Army coming in, which should be an exceptional crowd. You can't look past anybody, but I think there's great excitement to go to FAU. Been a back and forth series. They dominated it early. They obviously in the Kiffin years were very salty against North Texas, but the Mean Green started to play them better, and I think there's a lot of excitement. Now the weather is a concern. We'll see how this week plays out, but that aside, I think just trying to get to Boca and be playing the way North Texas was before the bye week is the focus.
Yeah, certainly a challenge, of course, the entire area affected by the hurricane, and I think it may affect the game, too, if there's any residual weather and things of the sort that may actually play a factor going into Saturday. If anything, it may hinder the North Texas passing attack. So with all that being said, Hank, and FAU, what they've done, you've already said defensively, the way that they take the football away is concerning for a team that likes to fly by the seat of their pants offensively at times. How much of a challenge is it this week for the Mean Green against the Owls?
Well, I think as that Mean Green defense wants to look to what they want to be, they would want to steal a page or two out of FAU's playbook because anytime you're +3 or better in the turnover margin, then your defense is helping you win games. I think that's the one thing that's kind of missing right now when you saw those stats, North Texas at -3, Florida Atlantic at +3, and Florida Atlantic's doing it in a lot of different ways. They're getting picks, they're forcing fumbles, they're recovering fumbles, so that opportunistic trait that they have, like you say, if it's a bad weather game, that's a check in favor of the Owls. And I think they've got a pretty strong run game. But keep this in mind, when you look at North Texas and you think explosives, certainly there are a bunch of those in this offense, but they're not all through the passing game. North Texas has hit on some big plays in the run game. So if it ends up being a game where you can't throw the ball as much, I'm sure FAU would love that proposition. But I think North Texas knows now the balance they've displayed to this point means they can score in a variety of ways.
Now, they've seen it a couple times this year where they have unsung players step up in a big way. Most notably, at least in my head, because I called the game, was Mackenzie McGill scoring 3 touchdowns against Wyoming. Who's one player for North Texas that has to step up in a big way for them to beat FAU this week?
I think in a game where the weather could be kind of an issue, I think the tight ends are always check down players. I think they're the guys that can kind of clean things up when it's a little dicey to try to stretch the field. I don't know that I can call anyone out in person, but I think that's a unit that's been waiting to maybe be embraced a little bit more. So I would expect to see a little bit of the tight end action. But again, you pointed out a really good one. I think any one of the three running backs right now, if they get the hot hand, can have that breakout game, because I do believe Eric Morris trusts Patrick Cobbs to be playing the hot hand. There's a lot to be said for trying to wear someone down with the run game. But when you have as many injuries as North Texas has, I think you try to find that kid that is really toting the rock hard and try to run him as a workhorse. So the weather will be a real dictator in how the game is played, probably.
You've talked about a couple of North Texas's players, but I want to ask you about somebody else that you've worked with, and he's sitting right next to me. Who has to step up? But what has been your favorite Kyle story in getting an opportunity to work with him? We're going to switch the energy of the interview a little bit.
Well, the only time he's really caught me off guard is when he told me he had triplets on the way, and I'm like, oh my.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's all I said, but then I have bought him diapers, and I will continue to do that. No, I've known him since he was a student, and he knows I'm a huge fan. But the best thing I can say about Kyle is he gets along with everybody. And so when you're in broadcasting, you realize it is a team. And, it's nice when you can walk into a room with somebody that kind of lights up the room with energy, enthusiasm, but also an understanding what everyone's role is. That said, I'm not going to say any more because I don't want his head getting too big. But he's done well, and thank goodness those triplets are all healthy, and we'll keep feeding him some diapers until that time is over.
I love it. Hank, appreciate you as always. Your check's in the mail for saying some nice things about me on the show. Not from being on the show, but just saying the nice things. But we appreciate you as always. Safe travels again to Florida this weekend. Stay safe while you're down there. Get back and have some fun in some American Athletic Conference action.
Thank you all. Appreciate the time.
There he goes. Hank Dickinson of the Mean Green Radio Network. Maria, he's taught me everything I know. Every single thing.
And how much did you give him for all those nice comments?
That's an undisclosed amount.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll make sure to check with him after this because I'd like to know
the
about
accountant.
that as well.
Yeah, the accountants are currently working to try and find the budgetary restrictions that I have to hit. But yeah, no, a lot of fun. I love having Hank on the show, and of course, he's always been one of my favorites. But lots of action this week outside of North Texas. There's a lot of excitement around those teams, but Maria, there's a couple teams, too, that haven't had as much excitement recently, and that's UTSA and Rice.
Yeah, we're going to talk about both of those teams, especially UTSA, who came into the season, picked second in that poll. And, it's just really difficult when you have high expectations for a team and they're just not meeting them. But what I will say, Kyle, is there's still a lot of football left to be played. And
yes,
I think that's what we're going to talk about right now is the way in which these teams can kind of bounce back. So I'll let you go first, starting with UTSA. How can they recover from some of the games that they've had so far this season?
I think the biggest thing for UTSA is push the reset button. And they're coming off of a bye week, so they're able to do that. And I've talked on this show specifically about the run game. They haven't run the football well. You have that three-headed monster with Brandon High, with Robert Henry, with Kavorian Barnes. I mean, those three guys are supposed to be your bread and butter. And instead, all three of them are either under 200 yards or, in the case of High, you only have 203 yards rushing on the season. They haven't found a rhythm, and I think it starts at the offensive line for them. The offensive line has not been great for UTSA up to this point, and they're supposed to be. They were picked to finish second. They probably would have had my vote to be the win in the conference. So if we're talking about most disappointing teams to this point, it would be UTSA, and it's not even just the win-loss record. Sure, the win-loss record at 2-3 doesn't look great, but it's the way they played in these games. And one of their wins against Kennesaw State did not play well. They got blown out by Texas State. Of course, I thought they would show something, at least going into the year. I thought they would show something against Texas on the road. I know Texas is a different animal right now and the number one ranked team in the country for a good reason, but they didn't show anything in that game that I thought you could really build off of. Jeff Traylor is a phenomenal head coach. He'll get it turned around, and I think it starts this week against the Rice Owls.
And that's going to be my next question for you is how do they capitalize playing a team that's also struggled a lot? Rice sitting at 1-4. Yeah. How can UTSA maybe push the envelope a little bit against the Owls?
Well, Bill Belichick always said it back in the day. It was do your job. DYJ. Right now, you do not want to play Superman. Don't have your guys go beyond what their capability is and press the issue of what has been a slow start for this Roadrunners ball club. Be yourself, do your job, and everything else will fall together. On paper, UTSA should be the better team in this matchup. They have the most talent. They have the most experience. In my opinion, Jeff Traylor is one of the best coaches in the country, not to say especially in the American Athletic Conference. So play within yourself, get back to 3-3. You hit the reset button, and you have some winnable games this week against Rice, next week against FAU, Tulsa, Memphis is going to be really their next big challenge. If they're winning going into that Memphis game, there's not a chance maybe to try and turn this thing completely around if they don't beat Memphis and they don't win those first 3 games initially.
Yeah, I feel like it's also that old coach speak as well of one day at a time, right?
Yeah.
So you have to take everything one day at a time. Again, just day by day, do your job. So UTSA and Rice, another matchup. We have some other games coming up in the American Athletic Conference that we'll be keeping our eyes on as well. It's a little bit lighter week of games.
Yeah.
Take a look right there. You have UAB and Army, North Texas and Florida Atlantic, Memphis, South Florida, and as we said, UTSA and Rice.
Yeah, I really like this slate of games. Couple national networks as well. You got the CBS Sports Network for UAB at Army, and then North Texas at FAU getting started on ESPN2 in that one as well. So good national audiences, as it should be for teams like Army, who's playing a high brand of football. North Texas, that's having an exciting offensive brand that we just talked about a little bit with Hank Dickinson. But I really am interested in that Memphis game too, and we talked about that a little bit earlier as well. But Memphis is a team that can win this conference. They have to show out big against South Florida if they really are going to stand a chance to try and put themselves back on the map. And if you're South Florida, you're in desperation, bro.
No, absolutely. I mean, we already touched on it a little bit, but yeah. I think that's going to be such a good game to watch. And all of our games in the American Athletic Conference are going to be exciting. We want to make sure we're tuning into all of them, but especially when you have those national eyes as well, I think that's something that just speaks so highly of these programs.
No doubt. This is a good conference, and we're kind of in that lull of a couple games and teams on byes. Last week, there were a significant number that were on the bye week. This week, you got the other half of the conference seemingly having that as well. But once we get back next week and those byes are starting to sprinkle out of there a little bit, this is going to get wild. It really will, because I think these bottom half teams are going to find a way to start knocking off some of the top leaders right now.
And it's interesting, too, because you see somebody starting to pick up steam and then they hit a bye week, and you always want to see how are they going to respond, right? And so we haven't gotten to see that ebb and flow of a full college football season because we're only just beginning, I like to say. I mean, some of these teams might not feel the same way, especially physically, but I am really excited just to see how that starts playing out because, as you said, I think that gap starts getting shorter as we get later in weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one, no doubt about it.
Certainly with NIL and being allowed to have, cash in college, like it's a different deal now. How about this?
Hassan Wilson with room to run. Wilson will take it to the house. 65 yards for 6. How do you do,
Mr. Wilson?
That was one of just 3 touchdowns for Hassan Wilson on Saturday. So we had to have him on our show this week. Hassan, thank you so much for joining All-American. And that offense, putting up 55 points against ECU, looked like it was clicking. What was working well for your team?
Coming out, we've been saying all week, we just had to start fast and really just make the most of when we on the field as an offense. And I think we really did that. We didn't give them a chance to get going. We was the first one to throw the punch and the last ones to do so. And I think that just played a big part. And you got to thank our coaches for that, just the intensity they brought, the energy, and just getting us prepared throughout the week.
Charlotte football definitely showed out. That run game was incredibly impressive. Was that something that you game planned for going into the game, knowing it would be such a big part of the offense, or did you just kind of take what ECU's defense gave you?
I'll say a little bit of both. I mean, of course, we come in prepared. We got runs, we feel like going to really gash on which they did. But like you said, is perfect, like taking what the defense gave us. And they gave us a lot. And we didn't let up not one bit because I may have scored 3 touchdowns, but Octavius Norton, he definitely had 2 on the day. So we took every opportunity and every chance we get to impose our will on them.
I know there was one Cartavius Norton touchdown where he just broke free from everyone. I don't know what his miles per hour was on that one, but I definitely want to check that out. But going back to you said you scored 3 touchdowns. 2 of them were back-to-back. Can you walk me through what it was like scoring that second touchdown? Did you even have time to think after scoring the first?
Honestly, I was just so ready to get back in there that I didn't care that I just scored or I just got the ball. Like, that's just my mentality. Like, I'm really like a bruiser when I run. I really run angry, and I just know what I can do with the ball in my hands. And it's honestly just a love for the game. I didn't want to come out, whether I got the ball or not. I don't think when I run, I react, and my reaction is crazy. I just got to thank God for it because I wouldn't be able to do it without him.
Absolutely. And, you talk about reaction. One player on your team that has also reacted well to circumstances has been Deshaun Purdy, just stepping up when his team needs him the most. What has it been like seeing him perform at the level he has the last 2 games?
It's been great. It's been good to see him grow from like the kid he was from when he first got here in spring ball to the man he's becoming. He's learning to be more calm and just settle in because he's a great player, and I know he's going to do great things and have a great future ahead of him. I love to see and like I said earlier, like the coaches, man, they really got him. They really got him right, and along with his God-gifted talent, it's bright for Purdy.
Absolutely. He'll be fun to watch the rest of the season. Now, you won your last 2 games. What do you think has been working well overall for this Charlotte team? And then how do you take that momentum when you play Navy up next?
I think we got to keep the intensity. Got to keep the violence. Got to let them know we here to stay, and we is a force to be reckoned with. Everything is about consistency. Just keep going uphill. Don't go up. Don't go back down. Keep going up. Steady pace. Take it one day at a time. See, I like to live by this motto. I live with my feet at. I take it one day at a time, one step at a time, 1 second, 1 minute, 1 hour. And things going to take care of themselves. When we do our job, everything will take care of itself. That's the name of the game. Just do your job. Win your one-on-one.
There you have it. One-on-one. Win the one-on-one day by day. Hassan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. A lot of people do not have this opportunity to really sit where I'm at or even just to get an education. I just want to first and foremost thank God, my parents, and you guys for having me on.
Really cool stuff there, Maria. And of course, every time we get to catch up with a student athlete, there's always going to be a little extra emphasis whenever they're playing well. And like you could see there, he's excited about the fact that Charlotte is winning football games, and they're doing so in a fun way.
I love just getting to talk to him because I think another thing that was so cool was the fact of how excited he was to be on the show. Yeah. I think I was just like, oh, it's so cool when people are ready to talk to you, when they're having success, and when you are playing well, you should be highlighted. So I think that was probably one of my favorite parts of that interview.
Yeah, big week for Charlotte last week to get the job done and to beat an in-state rival like that in front of a crowd like that. We've already talked about it. That was a Charlotte crowd, and they brought it. And the 49ers rewarded on the field. They were definitely the better team on Saturday. But it was a big week for Charlotte. It's a big week this week for college football and really college athletics as a whole. It is Powerful Minds Week, Maria, and there's a lot going on across the nation whenever it comes to highlighting student-athlete mental health, and there's a lot of things that can happen with it as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that's very near and dear to my heart as well, just being a former student athlete, just how important it is to just have these conversations about student athlete mental health. And the Powerful Minds Initiative here at the American Conference does such a good job of that. It's brought on by our SAC, but then we also have so many student athletes and administrators and coaches just being participants in this initiative. And I think that it's something that the student athletes have really, really liked, and it's helped them a ton.
Now, you're a former student athlete yourself. I mean, how important is mental health on a day-to-day basis, and the fact that it's not always easy being a student and an athlete at the same time?
Yeah, I think it's just one thing that you don't really realize even going into college, because there's even a difference between when you're in high school as a student athlete than moving into the collegiate realm as well, because there's just even more added pressure, and especially now in today's age with social media and posting and NIL and all of that. There's a lot of pressure that you have to deal with in addition to just playing your sport. And I think that seeing people actually talk about that now is something that makes me really happy, because I didn't graduate that long ago, but I'm definitely a little bit more removed from today's current student athletes. And I just think that they're starting to have more resources because people are like, hey, we realize that this is something that's a little difficult, right? Yeah. And I think that's one thing that I'm just really excited about, is to see the way that people are having these conversations, and also just realizing that, it's okay to not be okay all of the time. We're all going through different things, and just having that courage to reach out to someone, to talk to someone. And I think when your teammates are able to talk to each other about it, I think when coaches are having those conversations, and now at the conference level that we're saying, hey, this is something we want to prioritize, man, that's really excited. As a former student athlete, I wish we had that when I was in school.
It really is. It's a great initiative that the American is able to put out there and really highlight across each of their schools across the country, from coast to coast, now being represented in Powerful Minds. And you got a chance to catch up with Dr. Lee from South Florida, who, of course, has done a great job of highlighting that throughout, ending the stigma and spreading the word for mental health in these different campuses across the way. Let's take a look at Maria catching up with Dr. Lee.
Joining us now from Studio A is Assistant Athletic Director and Director of Sports Psychology at the University of South Florida, Dr. Lee Dortfeld. Dr. Lee, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, good morning, Maria. It's a pleasure to be with you and to have this opportunity to speak about a really important initiative that the conference has been putting on that's been a big help to our student athletes. So appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, inform some people about it, and continue the great initiative that we have.
Yeah, it's a fantastic initiative. That's the Powerful Minds campaign put on by the American Athletic Conference. And Dr. Lee, you've been around since the inception of it. So what have you seen, and how have you seen it grow in the past couple of years?
Yeah, I think the idea initially was really exciting to see the idea of mental health coming kind of out of the gray and the black areas of not really being at the forefront of things, and recognizing that being a student athlete, as wonderful it is in so many ways, also comes along with some of the things, in, like pressure and expectations and things like that do affect our student athletes' mental health. And I think a lot of times what happens is, we assume that these people are superstars and rock stars and superheroes, and believe me, they are. But there's also things that go on behind the scenes that help and support them to allow them to do that. And I think what the initiative has done is kind of given us all a chance to talk about it, grow it, talk about it in different ways, and really work towards destigmatizing the issue of mental health among student athletes.
So when you say destigmatizing the issue of mental health among student athletes, what exactly does that look like, and what are you doing on your campus to help that cause?
Well, we've got a couple different things going. Obviously, we do unique programming around the topics that were given from the conference that they want to focus on a given year. We try to do a lot of things where we're able to integrate our teams and our student athletes, because a lot of times they're kind of isolated in their own teams and don't have an opportunity to get together around a lot of things. So a lot of our push is around having those opportunities for them to get together and participate in a series of activities. We do a lot of things around I guess the best way to say it, a little bit of psychoeducation, a little bit of outreach and prevention, a little bit of relaxation, and actually utilizing some of the tools and the skills that we give them. And then what we do, which I think is something that I'm probably most proud of, and we've done really successfully here, is we started a peer-to-peer group among our student athletes focused on both mental health and mental performance, called Building Better Bulls. And it's a peer-led student athlete group that meets together every 2 weeks to talk about issues that they're having in being a student athlete, or how to live the student athlete lifestyle, different things that are going on within their teams that they can get feedback from. We provide information around suicide prevention and awareness. So those student athletes get information related to how to reach out to your teammates, how to get student athletes help if they need it, how to have conversations, especially hard conversations, when you do have a teammate that's going through something. It's one of the things that's really kind of taken off in the last 2 years. The other thing that we do that I think is kind of unique that I'm also excited about is our student athletes are going out into the community and pairing with the high schools in the local county, but also pairing with some of the pro organizations around town to also get information out to the younger student athletes at the high school and youth levels about how important this is and about how they can get help and get the support that they need to be successful both on and off the fields and the courts.
I love that. I just think those conversations that you're having with both the younger generation and then with your peers as well is so important. And, you mentioned it's something that you're most proud of. Why is that?
I think because what happens stereotypically in the student athlete milieu is, again, we're asked to be strong and tough all the time and be mentally tough and do all these superhero kind of things that we don't necessarily realize that takes a toll at times too. There's a lot of energy put out to be successful, to maintain that level of performance that we're asking from them. And I think what we've done really well here is in destigmatizing help-seeking behaviors, we've seen a very large increase in student athletes utilizing our services. And that's across a continuum. We kind of set our services up where it's a continuum of wellness, mental performance, and mental health. It allows us to provide kind of a menu, like if you were going to a restaurant, of different ways that they can connect with our office and get different kinds of supports for the different things that they need. And I think in destigmatizing it and kind of making it, like I kind of say it this way, it's like, if you don't make it weird, it's not weird. So where we're positioned within the building physically, which is among our student athlete enhancement unit, which is our student athlete development unit, and our academics unit, a lot of student athletes have the opportunity to have a lot of different touch points, and they see a lot of other student athletes and even coaches coming in and out of the offices. And though we will always provide confidentiality and privacy, it's still one of those things where it's like when you start to get the vibe that other student athletes are doing it and benefiting, it makes it easier for new student athletes to reach out and see what we have to offer them.
Absolutely. It's like setting that precedent, and then you see the upperclassmen doing it when you come onto campus. So you just kind of continue that as it goes on. And, one thing, though, that you mentioned as well is these athletes are sometimes considered superheroes. And as you said, they are. But how do you work with student athletes to kind of balance that, hey, you have to push through and be tough, but also, you have to talk about things and you have to work on the mental side of your sport as well?
So kind of two answers to that. I'm going to split that question up a little bit. I'm not a big believer in mental toughness as a thing. I'm a bigger believer in mental flexibility. I believe all of us as human beings, not just our student athletes, are able to be strong and tough when we have to be. We've all been through at least one thing in our life that has been really hard, and we found ways to get through that. And I think that we're capable of handling the hard things. I think when we talk about flexibility, though, we're talking about the ability to be strong and tough when we have to, but also knowing how to put the gas back in the tank for the next time you have to be strong. That's something that I've been really educating our student athletes on, that trying really hard to just be strong all the time is ultimately going to lead to some form of downfall. We can't be going Mach 3 with our hair on fire all the time and not put that gas back in the tank. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is changing the language from trying to create a balance to trying to create a blend. It's never going to be a 50-50 balance in what we're trying to do and what they're trying to do and the goals they're trying to achieve. But I think when you learn how to blend your life together, I think that's more realistic, and it gives them a greater sense of control of their environment and the things that they can do than just trying to be on kind of the balance beam all the time.
So mental flexibility and then blending instead of balancing. I think I've learned something in the last 2 minutes. That is so helpful. I never thought about it like that. And so one more quick question for you, and it's more of, what advice would you give to student athletes to create that flexibility, to create that bend, and how do you kind of approach it when you're helping student athletes with these things?
Yeah, I kind of use a little bit of humor because I think that can be a really effective tool sometimes. So a lot of times when I'm trying to introduce these concepts, I'll talk about the difference between the way they were generally taught or coached in the past in terms of not having that or just trying to be that strong player all the time. I think the things that we have to do is we have to introduce them to tools just like we do in their sports. In sports, we teach different hitting things, different throwing things, different shooting things. We're always creating more opportunities for them to find ways to be successful. I think that translates off the field into the mental health space as well. As long as we're giving them a multitude of tools to choose from, they're going to pick and find the ones that work for them. So whether it's yoga or meditation or mindfulness practice, whether it's joining our Building Better Bulls group and getting support from other student athletes, whether it's reaching out with social questions, how to manage social media, how to manage their social life. When I think you make it easy for them to find an entry point, I think that's the way that you can enter that part of their environment and provide more skills. And then when you're able to transfer that to the field, where the skills that we're teaching them is just like coaching them on the field. We're here to make them better. We're going to teach them a multitude of different skills, and then they can go out and execute them and come back and get feedback. I think that model aligns really well with the student athletes, because that's what they're doing on the field as well.
No, it makes so much sense. Dr. Lee, this has been so incredible. You have given us so much information, and I hope that everybody watching this, not just student athletes, but coaches, parents, players, just take some information away from it. Thank you so much for joining us here in Studio A.
No, I appreciate the opportunity again to be out here and speak on this topic. It's a really great initiative that the conference has. Student Athlete Mental Health Week countrywide is an awesome thing. All I can say is thank you guys for your support, and for our student athletes, both in our conference and out there. Get involved, see where you are on that mental wellness continuum, and don't be afraid to get the support that you need to be successful.
Special thanks to Dr. Lee from South Florida for taking some time and catching up with Maria. Now, I love what you said there at the end, talking about how people are making a change. People are ending the stigma around mental health. And you can see these shoes. They've actually been in our set before. They were back behind Maria not too long ago, actually. They're pretty big. These are big cleats from former Tulsa student athlete in Chris Paul, who now plays, of course, for the Washington Commanders. This was a part of the My Cause, My Cleats that the NFL puts on, and he still has Powerful Minds as a huge part of that. Mental health matters. These are a little banged up because I think he played a football game in them. Even got the dirt still on the back of the shoes. But this is a really cool thing, Maria. You got a chance to catch up with Chris as well.
Yeah, Chris was absolutely fantastic, and we actually asked him why he chose Powerful Minds to put on his cleats. Let's check it out. We can't talk about Powerful Minds without mentioning former Tulsa student athlete and current member of the Washington Commanders, Chris Paul, and he joins us now in studio. Chris, you were so involved with this initiative while you were a student athlete. Why?
It's such a big deal, especially in our space. I'm an athlete, a football student athlete. I'm now a football professional athlete, and the topic of mental health is something that's just not really welcome in our space. And so as a student athlete and now a professional athlete, I've just learned that being able to use your platform, especially from someone in my position in that male sport, in that sport that's dominated by toxic masculinity, it's really important to kind of like send that message, like it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to be vulnerable, and everyone's going to need help, whatever that looks like for you. And so that's why it's so important to me and near and dear to my heart.
Why do you think, especially going back some years, maybe when you first started as a college athlete, it wasn't as much talked about, that stigma behind mental health and talking about different things involving that was something that people just stayed away from?
I think it's just like you mentioned, Maria, it's been stigmatized for a very long time. And that just comes from several factors, whether it be knowledge about the subject or the concept of the subject, or just old school thinking, whatever it may be. But it's definitely had a huge stigma surrounding the subject. And so just even being willing to have these conversations and break down those barriers is definitely just the first step to advancing in that area.
How do you think some of those stigmas have started to change, especially with initiatives like this, or as you said, using your platform to spread awareness?
I think it's because we're starting to have those important conversations. And even here in the NFL, every team has a team clinician that is on staff and available to players. And so just because we're getting that message out there and having these conversations, that's why it's starting to trend in the right direction. And one thing I've learned just in my experience as a student athlete and now a professional athlete is that you never really know who your messages will reach. You never really know how much of a difference you can make in someone's life because you were the one that spoke up about something.
I absolutely love that. I think just even the smallest gestures can make a big impact on people. And so What are some ways that you've used your platform, first as a student athlete and now as a professional athlete, to help others?
Absolutely. I can think of many, many, many examples dating back to being a student athlete. And I took it upon myself just because it's who I am at my core to be just really holistic, balanced. So I was super involved in college. I served as the American Athletic Conference's representative to the NCAA Division I Student Athlete Advisory Committee. I was on numerous NCAA committees throughout my time in college, and I still get the opportunity to be on those now as a professional athlete. And so throughout my time, I've just learned that me speaking up about any type of subject has just had extremely positive effects on people that I did not know it could affect in that way. I've seen it here in in my professional career at this time where certain people, teammates I'm talking, will just reach out to me because they know I've spoken about mental health before, and they might want to know where they can find a therapist, who they can talk to, if they have any concerns that their conversations will be kept confidential or not. And they just ask me those questions open and candidly. And that's how I know that is just a small way that I know using my platform has had a positive effect.
That is absolutely incredible. And, you speak about those small ways that your platform is having an effect, but you did something in a little bit bigger way as well with the My Cause, My Cleats. So can you tell everyone what you selected to put on your cleats? And they're behind me. I have to see which way I'm pointing. They're behind me in the studio right now.
Absolutely. For the 2023 season, in the My Cause, My Cleats campaign, I chose to represent Powerful Minds. Absolute no-brainer. This has been an initiative that I've been so heavily involved with, changed my life in college, and I had no other choice and would absolutely do it no other way but to pay it forward and to put it on a huge platform.
And so many people got to see those cleats. For the student athletes now who are part of the initiative, what would some advice be from you that you would tell them, like, hey, make the most of it? How can they be more involved? How can they take advantage of this opportunity that the American Conference provides?
Absolutely. I would definitely urge them, like you said, to just make the absolute most of it. I'm just very, very, very proud of my alma mater, the University of Tulsa. They have done such an excellent job with the Powerful Minds campaign, and they really get the entire university community involved. And it ends up from what started in athletics being an experience and an initiative that is exposed to everyone. And so I would definitely urge them to take advantage of it. Obviously, it's bright green, right? And that is the mental health color. And so grab people's attention while you have it and make that difference.
I love that. Last question for you, because you give a lot of good advice. You just gave some already, but what would you tell someone, whether it's a student athlete, a professional athlete, or maybe just a regular person? What advice would you have for them if they're dealing with something, if they're struggling? How can they overcome that? What resources can they use?
Yes, absolutely. I would definitely say, one, understand that it is okay to not be okay. That can sound cliche to some, but it is just an absolute truth and an absolute fact. It is okay to not be okay. And being vulnerable, speaking up, jumping into these conversations, quite frankly, saves lives, right? There are numerous organizations, Mental Health America, for counselors, Psychology Today, right? Numerous resources that can point you in the right direction, even help filter certain aspects to more uniquely fit your needs. So I would definitely urge anyone to not be afraid of being vulnerable, understand that it's okay for everyone to reach out for help and take that next step.
It's okay to not be okay. Chris, this conversation has been so fantastic. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody else listening will as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Maria, thank you so much for having me.
Always great catching up with Chris Paul. Maria, great job on that. And it's always fun hearing from him because he does a little bit of everything.
Oh, and he did when he was in college, too. It was so funny. I told him I was prepping for his interview, and I was going through the list of things that he completed while in college and all that committees he served on, and I was like, I ran out of ink with my pen because there were just so many. He chuckled a little bit, but yeah, it was such a good conversation and really great advice to student athletes and just people in general.
He does a great job and pushing against the stigma of mental health and Powerful Minds Week. Again, it's such a wonderful, wonderful thing that the American Athletic Conference does, and it's something that I think should continue on for far, far, far into the future, and it should be fun to see how it continues to grow. Now, it's time for some American Athletic Conference top plays of the week, and we start things off at number 5. 3-0 was the score. UConn in the lead at home in the second quarter. Temple down on the road, finds a defensive stop, and they find a chance to flip the field. Linebacker Antoine Santiago says, forget your field position. I'm going to block this punt. He almost takes the snap himself. He finishes it in the end zone, and Temple gets on the board early against the Huskies.
Certainly super exciting, but another play that was very exciting, Kyle, was USF women's soccer. The AAC Offensive Player of the Week, Michaela Hill. She's going to beat a defender and just finds the... And I love that.
Ooh, just cold like that. Just getting it done in the pink uniforms and everything. That was a top shelf banger. Very nicely done, Miss Hill, and a great job on the pitch. Moving into number 3. Someone needs to send out a PSA throughout the conference, everybody, and the rest of the league that says, DNK, do not kick to Rayshon Pleasant. He turns on the Jets again and takes this one to the house again. He backed up perfectly behind his blockers and took off. The teammates paved the way out front. It was perfect execution from the special teams unit from the Tulane Green Wave. It wasn't the only thing that they did well against UAB. They got the job done with Pleasant taking it to the house.
I would, when I first saw it, I was like, am I having deja vu? I feel like I've seen this before. And I was like, oh, yes, he's already done this once this season. So, again, DNK, I believe is what you called it. So I think more teams going to have to listen to that one as well.
Not kick. Do not do it to Pleasant because he's starting to find a home in these top plays.
Speaking of kicking, let's go back to women's soccer because we've had a ton of great plays on the pitch this week. This one is Memphis down 1-0 to Charlotte. Kate House, look at this. Just the perfect bend into the upper 90. Charlotte's goalkeeper, Emma Wakeman, didn't even have a shot at it because House just perfectly placed that right there.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
I thought she was going with the chip to the far post to try and set up a cutter on the backside, try and catch the goalkeeper off balance. Instead, she caught the goalkeeper off balance. That still happened, but she did so by finding the back of the net.
I don't even think that she could have directed that with when somebody has a remote control airplane car
like
type
drone?
thing. Yeah,
you get a drone after it.
Yeah, she just did it with her foot perfectly.
Very nicely done. Very nicely done, Kate Howes. All right, our top play of the week here on All American. Air Force, Navy. Midway through the second quarter, Navy had been running all over the Falcons early, but they decide to throw it. Blake Horvath looks on the sideline, and he finds Eli Heidenreich. Listen. I know when you talk about Navy, you think ships, you think boats, you think sea, but they have the Blue Angels too, people. They can have the air attack working in their favor, and they showed it right there. What a throw, what a grab, and that's what I call some air-to-ground control whenever you have the toe drag swag on the sideline like that.
You see the turf pellets, that means it's inbounds, right? Yes. So when I watched it, the first take of it, you're like, oh my goodness, no, that wasn't even close. And then you watch the replay and you're oh my gosh, he caught that ball.
I love the way that they just kind of gracefully ended up just floating into the air in slow motion with these great camera angles that they ended up getting from CBS Sports, and the fact that it showed every track of where his foot started and ended on the field, and it ended up inbounds. Very, very well done from the Navy connection. Again, I've said it already in the show, Horvath for Heisman starting to pick up some steam.
You're really, I think it's starting to look more reasonable and reliable. I think you might have called it early, and I think everybody's getting on board with it.
Thank you.
I'm getting on board with it as
Thank you.
well.
Get
So,
on the ship because they're the Navy.
They're the Navy.
midshipmen.
Get
on the ship.
I'm getting on board with something else. So we still have one more top play to go.
What's that?
Oh, this is my favorite play
Oh,
of the week.
your favorite?
Yes, because it features you and your athleticism. So Kyle was calling a game earlier this week. Am I correct in
Yes,
saying
yeah.
that?
Uh-huh.
And let's just watch his skill again. He actually catches the ball while speaking. I think we have an even tighter angle of it.
Ooh, snag.
There it is. How about that? And you had a pen in your hand, from what
did.
I can tell?
Yeah, I had a pen in the right hand. I was sitting next to Heckma Harrison on the call for this North Texas Tulane volleyball match. And it was ricocheted off of, I can't remember, I think it was Aaron Johnson maybe, on the back line of North Texas. And I looked up, and I didn't even see it initially because our screen was right in front. And you could see kind of the reaction time, the little flinch. That was so I could get my arm out, and there was somebody sitting directly to my left. So there was a little bit of moving parts there. So the fact that I made the grab, I was very happy with.
So you said
Very
your
happy.
sister played college volleyball, right?
Uh-huh.
So did
For
she?
North Texas.
Yeah. Did she teach you that?
No, she didn't teach me anything.
That was just pure
I
athleticism.
taught her everything about athletics.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah,
why she was
how it
really athletic, all because of you.
Yep.
Good
She
to
was
know.
a D1 athlete because she learned from me the whole way. I never was a D1 athlete, but guess what? That's fine.
I think
as you
you
can
still
see,
take credit.
as you
Yeah.
can see, the athleticism's there. It just runs in the family. I
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
It.
I said
You
that about
snuck
my
this
sister.
one in the rundown, by the way. I didn't know this was coming.
I know. I specifically didn't. That's why I just put yay in the rundown. I saw you added
saw
an
that.
emoji, but yeah. So
Yeah.
I wanted you to be surprised. I wanted the first
I
take.
like it. Looks good. I can now officially say the best thing in my athletic career ended up on top plays of the American Athletic Conference. And I'm going to maybe clip this and post it on my own Twitter. We'll see what happens in that one. But, Maria, it's been so fun. Your first full show. How does it feel to wrap things up?
Oh my goodness, I can't wait for next week.
I
But we
know.
have even more things to talk about then. But today, a lot of fun.
Oh,
Talked to a lot of different people. But covered a
Yeah,
lot
you
of
had a
topics.
busy interview schedule this week.
It was. I was very busy, but hitting the ground running.
Yep.
First week in the American, so we're rolling.
And
Love
that's
it.
exactly every week here on All American. Maria will be here, and I'll be here too. It'll be a whole lot of fun. That does it for us. For Zach behind the curtain, for Maria Tribal Beast, I'm Kyle Yeoman saying so long from All American. We'll see you next week from Studio A.